Some of you may not have heard about our guests, so let me introduce them to you. Dr. Richardson is a member of the American Anthropological Association, and he currently serves as their national co-chair of the Committee for Promoting Public Understanding of Evolution. Dr. Richardson is a former president of the Southern Anthropological Society, and he currently serves as the editor of Anthropology and Humanism Quarterly, which is a national journal published by the Society for Humanistic Anthropology. A native Texan, Dr. Richardson attended Stephen F. Austin State University, where he earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in history and biology. After attending graduate school here at LSU, he studied at Tulane University in New Orleans, where he earned a PhD degree in anthropology. Dr. Richardson's name appears as editor or author of 3 books from the social cultural anthropology discipline. His research has appeared in a number of professional journals, including American Anthropologist and American Ethnologist. Dr. Richardson also enjoys writing fiction and poetry. This fall, Dr. Richardson began his 20th year of service at LSU. Among his other teaching responsibilities, he teaches a course in the evolution of man and culture, which is an upper-level course open to undergraduates as well as graduate students. The Department of Philosophy and the chapel on the campus are pleased to have representing this evening the evolutionist perspective, Dr. Miles Richardson. Would you welcome him with me? Our opening speaker this evening, Dr. Norman Geisler. There are few individuals who are better qualified to present the creationist perspective than Dr. Norman Geisler. Dr. Geisler holds professional memberships in at least 7 different professional associations, including the Evangelical Philosophical Society, which he served in 1976 as its first president. A prolific writer, his text entitled The Philosophy of Religion was named a Choice Evangelical Book of the Year by the editors of Christianity Today. As an author of 21 books and numerous articles in the popular Christian press, Dr. Geisler is in great demand as a public speaker. He's lectured at universities, colleges, and churches in 49 states and at least 9 foreign countries. Dr. Geisler earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy from Wheaton College in Illinois. He also holds a master's degree in theology from Wheaton College. He was awarded a seminary degree from William Tyndale College, his Master of Arts degree in philosophy from the University of Detroit. He's taken additional coursework in philosophy at Wayne State University and Northwestern University of Illinois. Dr. Geisler was awarded the PhD in philosophy from Loyola University in Chicago. A former chairperson of Trinity Evangelical Divinity School's Philosophy of Religion Department, Dr. Geisler is in his 7th year now as Professor of Systematic Theology at Dallas Theological Seminary. A former minister of churches in Michigan, Illinois, and Texas, Dr. Geisler has active radio and television ministries. In fact, in 1982, one of his creation-evolution debates was carried nationally by NBC television. The sponsors of this evening's debate are pleased to present to you our first speaker this evening, representing biblical creationism, Dr. Norman Geisler. Dr. Geisler.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and to share the platform with a distinguished scientist and scholar, as Dr. Richardson is, and to dialogue on a very important and crucial topic. Some time ago, over the apes cage at the Milwaukee Zoo, someone had inscribed these words, which summarizes our topic for this evening: "Am I my keeper's brother?" We'd like to, in discussing the question of origins, I would like to distinguish first 2 kinds of science. Science that deals with the present based on observation and repetition, some recurring pattern over against which one can test a theory, and science which deals with past events, which has no direct observation of the event and no recurring pattern of the event that it can observe. Consequently, is dependent on the principle of causality, assuming that every event has an adequate cause, and the principle of uniformity or analogy, which says what we see to be an adequate kind of cause in the present may be posited to be an adequate kind of cause in the past of that same kind of event. When we're dealing with the questions of origin, there are two basic views. One is a naturalistic perspective, and one is a supernatural perspective. And there are three main areas of controversy: the origin of the universe, cosmic evolution, the origin of first life forms, biogenesis, and the origin of new life forms, including man. As you know, for the first 240 years of science, from 1620 to 1860, the supernatural perspective dominated. Since 1860, the naturalistic perspective has dominated, and the roles of majority and minority have been reversed. Again today, there are numbers of scientists who are returning to a supernatural perspective with regard to origin, and I'd like to defend that perspective this evening. Let me begin by discussing the origin of the universe. Either the universe had no beginning or it had a beginning. If it had a beginning, it either had no cause or it had a cause. Now, since scientific rational thought is predicated on the premise that every event has an adequate cause, we can eliminate that one and discuss whether or not there is scientific evidence for the universe having a beginning. Because if the universe, the cosmos, the whole show, had a beginning, then it is reasonable to postulate a cause for the beginning of the universe. Let me begin my presentation of that by saying that the second law of thermodynamics, which says in a closed, isolated system, such as the universe as a whole would be, the amount of usable energy is decreasing. Now, we're all aware of the fact that this is not true of plants or living things because they're an open system. But the universe as a whole is a closed, isolated system. And in closed, isolated systems, the amount of usable energy decreases. In other words, the universe is running down. Nuclear fission is taking place, and this is true throughout the universe. That has led even agnostic astronomers, such as Dr. Robert Jastrow, who is the founder and director of the Goddard Institute for Space Research, chosen by the United States to represent us on television, a dialogue with the Russians, to say there are three lines of evidence: the motion of the galaxies, the laws of thermodynamics, and the life story of the stars, that point to one conclusion. All indicate that the universe had a beginning. The expanding universe, the radiation echo discovered by Penzias and Wilson, for which they were given Nobel Prize, and the second law of thermodynamics all point to one striking fact. The most striking fact that science has discovered, says the agnostic Dr. Robert Jastrow, is that there was a beginning of the universe. But if there was a beginning, then there must have been a beginner. If the universe had a beginning, there must have been a cause, because every event has an adequate cause. The only adequate cause for the beginning of the whole natural universe would be a supranatural cause. Dallas took this picture. It's one of the first pictures of a DNA splitting under electron microscope. In a single-cell animal, there's enough information that if spelled out in English would fill one volume of an encyclopedia. Now, here's what the creationist says. The first living thing, a one-cell animal that appeared in Darwin's little warm pond or the primeval soup, whatever you have, the prebiotic soup, that first thing had enough information to fill a volume of an encyclopedia. Now, what do we know from previous experience is the only adequate cause to regularly produce that kind of thing? Intelligence. For example, if you're on the beach and you look up in the sky and you see drink Coke in the clouds, what do you immediately assume? Bad storm. Bad storm. No, even that simple information you assume intelligent, creative. If you come to the breakfast table and the alphabet cereal is spilled, and in the middle of the alphabet cereal it spells out your name and address, what do you immediately assume? The cat knocked it over. The fan was blowing on it. No natural cause known to man will ever regularly produce specified complexity. Now, the first living thing had not drink Coke, 2 words, or a sentence. It had a volume full of information in it, and that speaks of an intelligent creator as opposed to a purely natural cause. Herbert Yaki, in the Journal of Theoretical Biology in 1981, applied information theory discovered by the Bell Laboratory to the DNA. he concluded that the relationship between the order of letters in the information of the human language and that represented in a DNA is mathematically identical. That is, if it takes an intelligent being to produce a language, then it took an intelligent being to produce the DNA of the first living thing. Carl Sagan, one of the most famous evolutionists today, says that if we received a single message from outer space, we would know there were intelligent beings there. Now, if you received a single paragraph from outer space and that was a proof of intelligence, how about if you receive a whole volume of information in the first living thing? That, too, is an indication of a creator. To believe in evolution is like believing that Webster's unabridged dictionary resulted from an explosion in a printing shop. Or as Wick Ramasinghe recently said, the colleague of Sir Fred Hoyle, the famous atheist astronomer, Wick Ramasinghe and Sir Fred Hoyle, who applied the same logic to the origin of life and have subsequently adopted a creationist point of view in their book Evolution from Space, he said to believe that life arose by pure chance and natural processes and natural laws is like believing that a tornado raging through a junkyard could produce a Boeing 747. Now let me apply this to the third area, the area of new life forms. Here again, there are two views, evolution and creation. Evolution saying no intelligent intervention, purely natural laws, time plus chance plus law. Creation saying no, it takes intelligent intervention to produce new life forms. What's the difference between these two theories? Well, the difference is simply this. Evolution traditionally held to a common ancestry. Some evolutionists are talking about multiple ancestry, but that just multiplies their problems of explaining the origin. Creationists believe in separate ancestry. To us, it's like a forest, not like a tree. The phylogenetic tree is the evolutionist explanation. Creationists believe that there are many trees in the forest. Variation within kinds, but no evolution between kinds. For example, creationists believe in microevolution. They believe in all the evolution you can observe in the present. They believe that changes take place in crossbreeding and genetic changes and mutations, all on a small scale. But they reject macroevolution between major kinds and forms of life, such as evolutionists traditionally describe, believe. So that what is the evidence for creation versus evolution? Well, let's take a look at the evidence and see what the evolutionists present. The evolutionists believe that if you start back at the basic life, you can move from the infantiles through the reptiles to the crocodiles to the Gentiles up on top. Or you can go from atom to Adam. You can go from the simple to the complex. They believe in total macroevolution. But what does the evidence say? When we look at the fossil record, the first thing we notice is that there is an abundant explosion of life in the Cambrian period. The life begins suddenly and abundantly in complex form, and it's boom on the scene. That phrase is a phrase taken right from an evolutionist textbook, abundantly and suddenly in the Cambrian period. When new forms of life appear, they appear without known transitional fossils, and they appear suddenly, and there is an abundance of life in the record. Evolutionists are embarrassed by the great gaps in the record. It is no exaggeration to say that it's not a question of missing links. It's a question of a missing chain. All we have is a link here and a link there. Most of the chain is gone. For example, the cover of a recent evolutionist journal called Creation Evolution suggests that the whale evolved from the cow. Now, as anyone can see, there's a whale of a difference between a whale and a cow. And there are hundreds of thousands of transitional forms missing there that, of course, the evolutionists have never been able to fill in. They do come up with a few so-called missing links. Here's one that's been touted for years by the evolutionists, Archaeopteryx. This is supposed to have been half reptile, half bird. Notice Archaeopteryx. Why is it half reptile? It has claws on its wings. So do ostriches. Does that make them a half reptile? There are two living birds, at least, with claws on the wings. No one calls him half reptile. Say, but he had teeth. Archaeopteryx had teeth. That makes him a half reptile. Every subclass of vertebrates, some have teeth, some don't. Some mammals have teeth, some don't. Some humans have teeth, some don't. Archaeopteryx was a bird, had perfect feathers, had wings, could fly. It's not a transitional form, and yet it's touted as one of the great examples of evolution. Another example often given is the example of coelacanth. Coelacanth was a lobe-finned fish from the Devonian period, thought to be extinct for millions of years, until fishermen off the coast of Madagascar caught some alive. Looked exactly like the ones millions of years ago. Hadn't changed. What happened to coelacanth? Well, one day, Ma and Pa coelacanth got grounded. Ma said to Pa coelacanth, either we're going to have to walk or starve. Over millions of years, the fins developed into legs, and coelacanth became a reptile, or something like that. Well, now let's analyze that. First of all, there are no bones in the fins that are attached to the pelvic girdle that would make it possible for it to support the weight of the body. There are no walking fish. The walking catfish doesn't walk. It slithers along on its belly. There's no evidence that coelacanth changed. There's no evidence that coelacanth ever developed legs that needed sturdy fin for deep sea swimming. The great gap between evolution and creation is manifest by a quotation from Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan said this: "The information content of the human brain expressed in bits is probably comparable to the total number of connections among the neurons, about 100 trillion, 10 to the 14th bits. If written out in English, say, that information would fill some 20 million volumes, as many as the world's largest libraries. The equivalent of 20 million books is inside the head of every one of us. The brain is a very big place in a very small place." Now let's go back to that primeval pond, the first simple one-cell animal that appeared, enough information to fill a volume of an encyclopedia. Takes an intelligent creator. How do you get from one volume to 20 million volumes? The evolutionist tells us it's very simple. It happens by mutations and natural selection. Here's an example of mutation. Mary had a little lamb. Make a mutation on it. What do you get? Mary had a little lamp. Make another mutation. Mary had a little lamp. In other words, when you make mutations on the genetic code, it garbles it. You don't get better information, you get worse information. So evolution believes that you can go from simple to complex, from one volume to 20 million volumes, simply by natural laws. Fans blowing on alphabet soup, explosions in printing shop. Natural law plus time plus chance does not account for the differences. In fact, Carl Sagan put it very well in his last quote. He said, "The neurochemistry of the brain is astonishingly busy. The circuitry of a machine more wonderful than any devised by humans." If the human brain is more wonderful than any devised by humans, a creationist says that's exactly the case. It wasn't devised by humans, and it wasn't devised by natural law. It was devised by intelligent supernatural intervention into the process. Morphology, bone structure, similarity, which we're going to hear a lot about tonight, does not account for the complex information inside the human brain. Only an intelligent intervener does. Similarity doesn't prove common ancestry. Similarity proves common creator, because it takes an intelligent being to produce specified complexity. The head paleontologist of the British Museum, Dr. Colin Patterson, said this about the so-called missing links. He's an evolutionist. He wrote a book on it. He said, "I fully agree with your comments on the lack of direct illustration of evolution transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I certainly would have included them. So much as I should like to oblige you by jumping to the defense of gradualism and fleshing out the transitions between the major types of animals and plants, I find myself a bit short of the intellectual justification necessary for the job. The evolutionist is short on evidence, great on theory. He is short on some known regular process by which natural laws can produce specified complexity. He is short on explaining how that which has a beginning didn't have a cause, how life came from non-life, how complex forms came from simple forms, but the creationist has a ready answer. An intelligent being created it in the beginning. An intelligent being produced the new life, and an intelligent being produced the new life forms. That's a credible, rational, scientific approach to origins that I believe is superior to the evolutionary approach. Thank you.
Well, I tell you, I know how old Daniel felt facing those lions now. Man, you turn this guy loose, he eats you up. But that's good. You know, we're here to look for the truth. And that's good. I believe it was the good Lord himself said, seek you the truth, and what will the truth do? It'll set you free, won't it? It'll set you free, that's right. And I'm glad we're here free. I'm glad we're free today, you know. Used to be we couldn't get together and talk like this. Used to be there were laws against it. We couldn't get it together and discuss these things. The people wouldn't let us. We're free today, aren't we? And whenever I say that word freedom, I'm reminded of the words of that must be the greatest Baptist preacher of contemporary time. I'm free. I'm free. Great God Almighty, I'm free. And I'll tell you, I'm glad to be free. And after this truth, and in equally immortal words of Hank Williams, the good Lord willing and the creeks don't rise, we're going to stay free. We're going to seek that truth. All right, first thing we've got to do in talking about evolution, we've got to separate evolution as a natural process and evolution as a theory. I'm not sure that's what Dr. Geisler's done here in his presentation. I've got to watch me 10 minutes, too. And he's going to tell me when they're over with, and then I can really get started. Yeah, we've got to distinguish evolution as a naturally occurring process and then as a theory. Evolution is a natural occurring process, a lot like soil erosion, like what he's talking about in the Grand Canyon. You know, it's going to go on. It's no matter what you call it. You know, you can look at that soil erosion, look at that face, you can tell it's soil erosion. You stop soil eroding, you know. And what's the soil going to do? It's going to continue to erode. And that's just like evolution. You know, you can call it lots of things. You can call it this, you can call it that, you might even call it creationism. But it's going to go on, you know, just like soil erosion. So, it's occurring yesterday, it's occurring today, and again, in those immortal words, the good Lord willing, the creeks don't rise, it'll continue to occur in the future. So, given that fact, it seems like to me what we've got to do is come to grips with it. We've got to understand it. We just can't write it off, shrug it off, say, well, you know, I don't believe in that. What kind of explanation is that? I don't believe in evolution. Is that coming to grips with it? Is that really getting hold to it? It does sound like that to me. It sounds like, you know, well, I just better not talk about that. You know, I'm just going to block that out of my mind. I'm going to just say I don't believe in evolution. I'll take care of that, and I'll go on and do something else. But it's too important to do that. We've got to come to grips with it. We've got to look it straight in the face and try to understand it. All right, and so then we come to the interpretive side of evolution. How are we going to interpret it? How are we going to interpret this naturally occurring process? Well, today, evolutionary science is a tremendously exciting field, and it's exciting because there are different interpretations. People like me, people and other evolutionists, nothing we'd rather do than get together and talk about that. And talk about the different interpretations. How are we going to make sense of this naturally occurring process? It's an exciting field. We're encountering new fossils every day. There's progress made in that area. There's progress made in molecular biology. We now know that we're far more close to the chimpanzee and the gorilla than we had formerly thought. And we had formerly thought we were close. We're even closer now. That their molecular structure is amazing like ours, even like Dr. Geisler. And they're like that, regardless, you know, you say, well, I don't believe that. That doesn't matter, see. The molecular structure is not listening to you. You say, I don't believe in that. Well, that molecular structure is going to molecular, regardless of what you say. All right. Now, let's see what else I can say here. Take up my 10 minutes so I can really get started then. All right. Dr. Geisler started with the origin of the universe in his presentation. Well, I can't do that. You know, I can't go back to the origin of the universe. I'm an anthropologist. You know what anthropology is? The word says that anthropology is the study of humans. Now, I can talk a lot about the origins of humans, and I'm fixing to as soon as I get 10 minutes get over and I can get started. What's Dr. Geisler? What's his field? It's theology, isn't it? Now, is he going to talk about the origin of God? Is that what he's going to do? Now, I'm going to talk about the origin of humans. I know my subject matter. You know, I know it in and out. Now, I can start right at the beginning and come on up to the top. But he doesn't do that, does he? He doesn't talk about, well, how did God come to be? You know? And, of course, he's only talking about one God. He's talking about the God of Dr. Geisler. You know, the God that they teach about in the Dallas Theological Seminary. He's not talking about the God that the Pope, you know, prays to. I don't think they're talking about the same God. They might be. You know, sometimes they say, well, oh, no, we're talking about the same God. You know, sometimes Baptists, Catholics say, oh, we talk about the same God. But that's when they just feel ecumenical. You know, when they really get going, when they really get at one another, they say, well, no, that's a Catholic Bible. You know, that's not my Bible. That's a Catholic Bible. So, what God are we talking about here? We're talking about the God of Dr. Geisler and the God of some of you. I know, you know, fans of Dr. Geisler. You know, that's all right. I got my fans here, too. You know, so, the origin of God, that's a tremendous subject, seems like to me. But we ought to hear from that, from a theologist, shouldn't we? We ought to be told, you know, where is this God comes from? Let's have the courage to face, you know, maybe we don't know. You know, maybe we don't know about the origin of the universe. Maybe we don't know about God, you know. Who is God? Let's explore that. Let's have the courage to face the unknown. Now you say, oh, I don't want to face the unknown. You know, well, that's all right. But, you know, if you don't want to do that, if you just say, well, I don't believe in evolution, that's fine. You know, that's fine. But then you're not coming to grips with the facts. Where am I now in the 10 minutes? I got 2 more minutes to spend, then I can really get at this stuff. But, you know, he talked about, you know, that a form, that those faces on Mount Rushmore, you know, that they were made there, you know, only an intelligent person could produce those faces. You know, that's an amazing statement. You know, that really lays me low that he said that. They teach that at the Dallas Theological, I know that. You know, it reminds me of the argument back in, I think it was the 18th century. The 18th century was when this argument was put forth. You know, that God is like a watchmaker. You see a watch out there laying out there on the floor, and you say, well, that watch couldn't just occur naturally. Somebody had to make it. It had to be a watchmaker. You know, therefore, you know, here's the earth. God had to make the earth. That's all right. Well, you know, I can see that. You know, only trouble is that we've seen watchmakers. You know, you can go down, well, you can't go downtown Baton Rouge, there's no watchmakers there, but you can go out there in Bon Marché, places like that, and maybe find a watchmaker. But when's the last time you saw a tree maker? You see plenty of trees. You know, trees got a nice lot of symmetry to it and everything. It's got a form, got a shape to it. But I haven't seen a tree maker lately. Now, some of you, you know, when you get to going and get ecstatic, you know, when the spirit's moving, you might see a tree maker. But the rest of us, we can't see tree makers. All right, I'm going to sit down now and let him. Well, evolution as a naturally occurring process, of course, produces facts. And you've got to look at the facts in order to understand what's happening. I'm going to show you some facts right now. I got them all wrapped up. These are my bags of facts. Yes? Looky here. Looky here. All right, that's a fact, isn't it? I brought that along. That's mine, by the way. I brought that along so that Dr. Geisler and I could check on some points, you know, if we needed to get the gospel here. I brought that along for that. Unfortunately, though, it's not the real Bible. It's not the King James Version. It's a modern version, but we'll just have to make do with that. All right, now, you know, if I sound like a preacher, I miss my calling. All right, that's the wrong bag. I gotta hurry up now. All right, we're going to start out with contemporary human skull. All right, this is you. This is what you look like. This is a modern skull. You know, it sits there in my office, and I look at it every day and get a lot of wisdom from that skull right there. Because you know what this is. This is a graduate student. You know? This is a graduate student that just didn't make it through Dr. Ramanovsky's method and theory class. So that's how we look today. Now, I'm going to put that right there, okay? Well, as we go back down through time, you know, if we go further back through time, there ought to be a time when we don't find people that look like that. All right? All right. If we go back yesterday, people are going to look just like that. If we go back 100 years, they're going to look like that too, aren't they? What about 200, 300, 400, 1,000 years? Let's look at what they look like 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago, let's see what they look like. Find the right bag. All right. Here's what they look like 10,000 years ago. Now, well, that looked pretty much like this guy here, isn't it? Well, maybe there's not much to this thing called evolution. 10,000 years, you know, they look pretty similar. This one's a little bigger than that, but that's just a small graduate student there. And this is a grown person here. This is Cro-Magnon. You've all heard about Cro-Magnon, haven't you? You know, fossil finds in France. All right, we put that like that. Now, let's go back further. Let's go back further in time. Let's go back to 30,000 years ago and see what we got. 30, 35, 40, 100,000 years. Let's see what we find there. Now, if we find somebody back in that looks just like this, you know what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to shout glory and start holy rolling. But we go back 30,000 years ago. We find people that look like this. Now, there's something happening. You can see that, can't you? There's something happening. And as we go back further through time, they're looking less like us. But this is Neanderthal. You've all heard of the Neanderthal man. And you probably heard, those of you who are not in anthropology haven't taken my evolution of man and culture class, you probably heard wrong, you know, because Neanderthals oftentimes depict as a rather beetle-browed sort of individual like that. But that's not the way it was at all. You know, he was a sensitive, caring person. You're laughing, aren't you? He was a sensitive, caring person. Now, how do I know he was sensitive and caring? Because he buried his kids. You know, and the little baby Neanderthals died for whatever, you know, reason they might have died. Maybe just, you know, got sick, whatever, and died. The adults buried them. And we dug them up, you know. We dug up the little babies and they had grave goods on it. Had artifacts and things stuck in the grave. You know? So, you know, they cared. And they worried about people. All right, we go back now. This Neanderthal, 200,000 years ago. We go back further in time, we're going to find a form that looks even less like us. We shouldn't we? That's what evolution says. You know, we change through time. Now, here's what we look like today. This is what we look like 10,000 years ago. This is what we look like back to about 200,000 years ago. From 200,000 on backwards to about 1 million years ago, we look like this. Now, who in the world is that? Now, that's Homo erectus. He's in our genus, the genus Homo. We're Homo sapiens. Cro-Magnon's Homo sapiens. Neanderthal was Homo sapiens. But he was Homo sapien Neanderthalensis to separate him out a little bit from the rest of us. But this is Homo erectus. It's a different species. Same genus Homo, but a different species. Uh-huh. Fine. Now, we're getting somewhere. Now, we go back, 2 million, 2.5 million years ago. We're getting pretty close to the origins of these creatures we call humans. Indeed, is Homo erectus a human? Certainly he's in our genus, walked erect, made tools, made fire, ate one another. All those human traits. All right, here we go. All right. 2.5 million years ago, that's what you look like. Oh, that's Australopithecus. That's a different genus. That's what you look like. Okay, well, you might say, well, I know what I look like. But what's the evidence that this is a human? What's the evidence that it's in our evolutionary line? Well, first of all, let me point out the trend here. The trend is in human evolution, as far as the skull is concerned, for the face to get bigger and the brain gets smaller. So we have a gradual increase in the size of the face and a gradual decrease in the size of the brain. And that just carries that trend on. But the best evidence that we have of the human status, or at least the hominid status, of this species, this fossil, this genus, is the fact he walked upright. And that's a characteristic that separates us today from the chimpanzee and from the gorilla and from the rest of the apes, and indeed from the rest of the primates. None of them walk erect, bipedally on two legs like we do, normal. This is our normal mode of locomotion. Now, occasionally, they can get up on their back legs, like Cheetah and Tarzan do lots of things. Get up on his back legs and bounce around, but that's not how normally they walk. Okay? So what's the evidence that Australopithecus walked erect? Well, that evidence is right here. That's his pelvis. That's just the bone. That's the pelvis. All right. Well, you say, I didn't look like my pelvis, but it does. Let me show you what your pelvis looks like. All right. Okay, that's your pelvis. That's a modern, contemporary human pelvis. That's the pelvis of Australopithecine. It's smaller, isn't it? But basically, it's the same thing. Now, you've got to be a specialist to find out the difference. Let me compare that with the chimpanzee. Now, this is a modern-day chimpanzee. Now, chimpanzees have evolved, too, just like we have. But this is a modern-day chimpanzee. This is modern-day human pelvis. And you see, this part up here flares straight out. Here, in this part, though, it circles around. This part here, that's the hip bone. It forms a basin. The other pelvis comes around here to form a basin. See, in the case of the chimpanzee, this goes straight out. Why is it? It's related to upright stature. You walk erect, you got to have that basin-shaped pelvis. You got to have that basin-shaped pelvis to hold up the gut. All right. So here, this Australopithecine walked erect, had an basin-shaped pelvis. So that's one of the major reasons for putting him in direct evolutionary line. Another reason is that he doesn't look like any of the ancestors of the apes. They're pursuing a different evolutionary history. They have evolved just as we have evolved, along a different line. Something. Okay, so let me put this Australopithecine. Well, wait a minute. Well, I just forgot something. I hold that up to you, and you say, well, That's what you look like 2.5 million years ago. And you say, well, no, I didn't look like that. But the more you look at that thing, now you look at it now, the more you look at it, you begin to scratch your head. You know, I've seen that guy somewhere before. You know, I've seen him somewhere before. Maybe down there at the state legislature. Maybe you was over in the governor's mansion. Then you said, light dawned, you said, I know who that is. That's a Louisiana politician. He's got a small brain and a big mouth. Where's the missing link? You tell me, where's that missing link? Maybe it's right there. Huh? That's the missing link? Where's that missing link? Is that not a sequence, an evolutionary sequence standing right in space? It's not? No. What is it then? You're standing looking at it. You know, you've got to come to grips with that. You say, well, I don't believe that. That's fine. You know, you don't have to believe it, but there it is. You know, it doesn't matter. You say, I don't believe it. There it is. So what does it mean? You know, you've got to come to grips. You've got to understand it. You've got to figure out, well, what in the world does that mean? The fact that I go all the way back to the Australopithecines. What it means is something magnificent. What it means is that's our story right there, you see. Well, let me add a little bit more to that story. Let me turn my page first before I get on to the other part of the story. All right, now so far, really, we've defined the primate, we've defined the human as a primate that walks erect. So if we look at all these, figure out what's common among all of these is that you remember the primate order, you know, like chimpanzees, gorillas, baboons, and so forth. But we're different from them in that we walk erect. So a human is a primate that walks erect. You could say he's an ape that walks erect, but that wouldn't be right. That's not the correct way of doing it. Apes do things differently. Now, we're a primate that walks erect. Now, are you satisfied with that definition of who you are? Is that who you are? Just a primate that walks erect? I tell you, I do more things than that. I do more things than just walking around. What other factor might come in here to help us to understand evolution? Tell you that other factor is the capacity to dream. To dream, not only to dream, but to turn those things into reality. Wow, what's the evolutionary record of that? Well, you've got it, I'll tell you. Let's start out with the first dream. Here we are. That's a pebble tool made by Australopithecus. And you say, well, that's not much of a dream. It looks like a nightmare to me. But the more you look at it, and Dr. Geisler, he's good on these, forms that have intelligence behind them, and he'll tell you that's an intelligence made that. And what you're looking at is a dream that's come true. The Australopithecines got together, and there's something happening in their head. They're having these visions, and some of you ought to know about visions. I tell you, but that's these dreams in their head, and they're trying to talk to one another about these dreams. What it is that they see. They're seeing something. They're seeing a tool in this rock. There's a rock laying out there, and they're seeing a tool in that rock. And they talk about it and they discuss it, in the best way they can. And then one of them reaches out with his hand, gets that rock there, and he starts chipping away at it to make that rock like that dream. And the others say, yeah, that's the way to do it. And together they turn their dreams into reality. Now, that's being human. All right, let's see what happens to a dream. They're going up to Homo erectus. We see a different kind of tool. Old Australopithecus banging away at that rock, his dreams weren't all that complete, or his hands weren't working too well. But looky here. That would look a lot better tool right there. So something's happened to our dreams. We're beginning to be able to dream better and to coordinate our actions with our dreams. We're beginning to pool our ideas better and to come up with better tools. All right, going up to Neanderthal. Dreams get even better. Here's another tool. It's a lot finer made. It's got more symmetries to it. So something. The Neanderthal is dreaming even better, and he's turning those things into reality. All right, finally, we come on up to pragmatism then. If I find it here somewhere. There it is. And we find just a perfect, perfect tool. Now look at that. That's got symmetry that way. That's got symmetry that way. That's a real delicate instrument. So this is the result of the dreams that they're having among themselves, the dreams that they've had in the past, the dreams that they're looking ahead and molding those dreams to fit that, to make that dream come true, to extract out of that rock that tool. And so that's what the capacity to walk upright is one of our attributes. Certainly it is. It's an important attribute. This other attribute, the capacity to dream, the capacity to symbolize and turn those symbols into reality, that's another attribute. And we can dream someday about going to the moon. And damn me if we didn't do it. Now, ain't that magnificent? Tell me, that's good, isn't it? All right, here's that story starts with Australopithecus and come all the way up to landing on the moon. We started out in the African savannah 2.5, 3 million years ago. And we've come a long way. And where are we going to go next? What we're looking at is a story of becoming, a story of being, a story of march of mankind from the African savannah to the Tranquility Base. This is my story. It's your story. It's Dr. Geisler's story. It's the story of us all. It's the story of the human species. Thank you.
Let me, first of all, respond by pointing out that the creationist argument and the total picture has to do with the origin of the universe, the origin of life, the origin of new life forms, and the origin of man. And, of course, we did not hear any response to the origin of universe argument or the origin of life argument, or, for that matter, the origin of the thousands and thousands of new life forms. We heard only a presentation with regard to the origin of man, so I assume those other arguments are valid because they were not refuted. Secondly, let me point out that the facts on the table there are not as clear-cut facts as one would surmise. For example, presentations like this have long existed in biology and anthropology textbooks, which included people like Piltdown Man. 350-some doctoral dissertations were written on Piltdown Man. People got PhDs for that, which simply means phenomenally dumb, because Piltdown turned out to be a fraud, a total hoax, but he was once paraded with evidence like this. Nebraska Man was once used in illustrations like this. That turned out to be an extinct pig's tooth. So you have to take, not with a grain of salt, but a barrel of salt, some of the things that you hear anthropologists tell you. Let me also point out that a series like this, even if you could prove that every one of these actually existed and that they were ancestrally related, which of course now evolutionists have generally given up with regard to the horse. That's not an ancestrally related series, so that is vanishing from most textbooks. Many anthropologists disagree that this is an ancestrally related series. Many agree that there are modern type men earlier than some of these later, so there's a mixture of it. It's not quite as factual as it may look when you line them up on the table. But even granting their wildest imagination, granting the billions of years, granting that these were all found in sequence, granting that they were finally graded series, you could line up automobiles and do the same thing. Would that prove that one evolved from the other? You could line up the canning kettle, small kettles down to a teaspoon in your kitchen. Would that prove the canning kettle evolved from a teaspoon? What they have to show is that there is some mechanism, some mode, some natural process that can produce 20 million volumes worth of complex information from one little volume. There is no natural law known to man that can produce that. All the similarity of skulls will do absolutely nothing. To say that evolutionists agree, or to imply that they agree on these matters, is not at all the case. For example, let me quote some evolutionists with regard to Australopithecus. They say morphology or shape of the teeth in many features is more man-like, but all of these animals possess small brains, the cranial capacity averaging 500 cc's or less, about 1/3 of that for modern man. Both of them had ape-like skulls and jaws. In fact, Lord Zuckerman's conclusion, he spent 15 years of research on this. Although most studies emphasize the similarity of Australopithecines to modern man and suggest, therefore, that these characteristics were bipedal toolmakers, at least one form of which was this. He denies this and suggests that what we are looking at here is actually Montague, the great anthropologist, said the skull form of Australopithecines is extremely ape-like and shows too many specialized and ape-like characteristics to be the direct ancestor of man or the line of descent that came to man. Neanderthal was man. Cro-Magnon was man. Those are human. But they had religious activity. They had God consciousness. They had evidence of culture. But when you get to jawbones, teeth, fragmentary evidence, wild guesses about age, disagreement among anthropologists, revisions of textbooks, throwing out frauds, you can't call that factual. That's hypothetical. That's speculative. That's a guessing game, and it in no way invalidates the arguments in favor of an intelligent creator of the first living thing of the universe and of every other living thing that emerged on the scene after that. Small changes over a long period of time do not prove evolution, because time plus chance plus natural laws never produces greater specified complexity. Go up in an airplane, drop colored paper out at 10,000 feet. What are the chances that it will form your name on your roof? Slim. You say, we need more time. Go up 20,000 feet and drop it out. What will happen? It will be more mixed. Go up 10 miles and drop it. It'll be more random. What the evolutionist needs to show is that apart from intelligent intervention, you can produce more information, more complex, specified complexity of greater nature over a long period of time by purely natural laws. That they haven't done. But creationists can show how an intelligent being can put alphabet cereal together into a message, how an intelligent being can write drink Coke in the sky. Say, well, you've never seen a tree maker, you have seen a watchmaker. Carl Sagan has never seen extraterrestrial intelligence, but when he gets the first message from outer space, he'll believe that it's there. I've never seen an ancient Egyptian, but I just saw the pyramids a couple weeks ago and the Sphinx, and that is enough evidence to indicate there were intelligent beings there. Though we have never seen the original creator of the universe, neither have evolutionists seen the original natural process that they posit forth. Both of us are engaging not in empirical science, we're engaging in forensic science. We are reconstructing the past built on the evidence in the present. The unobserved events of the past are reconstructed in the light of the best evidence. The best evidence says that it always takes an intelligent being to produce specified complexity. That's creation, not evolution. Thank you.
We invite you to stay now for a very brief question and answer time. We won't go any longer than 30 minutes, but some of you do have some questions. I have some of those here. You may have some other questions that were raised. Write them down, pass them forward, and we'll try to address, if we do get some more, as many as possible this evening. Both of our guests have agreed that they will have a maximum of 2 minutes, and each of them will be given the opportunity to answer every question. The first question that I have here is addressed specifically to Dr. Geisler, and of course Dr. Richardson will have an opportunity to respond if he cares to. Dr. Geisler, when you say that everything must have a cause in science, that's fine. What you fail to realize is that you must explain now scientifically God's existence.
The principle of causality simply says that every event has an adequate cause. The principle of uniformity says that we should posit the same kinds of causes that we see producing that event in the present regularly in the past when we don't see it. So, for example, if we see things like the Grand Canyon being produced in the present, then we can posit a natural cause for them in the past. If we see things like Mount Rushmore coming from intelligent causes in the present, then we should posit an intelligent cause for something like that in the past. As a scientist, that's as far as you go. I did not quote from the Bible. I did not describe the nature of this God other than it was a powerful, intelligent being, and I did not imply any kind of act of worship toward it. As a scientist, you simply go where the evidence leads. And if the evidence leads to an intelligent cause, archaeologists looking at an archaeological artifact, say, for example, an arrowhead, then all of our previous experience tells us that we need an intelligent cause for the arrowhead and not river water or some kind of wind erosion to account for it. So from a strictly scientific point of view, we're acting as a forensic scientist using the evidence in the present to reconstruct the likely cause in the past. If you have a beginning of the universe, then obviously the only likely cause is something beyond the universe, and if the universe is the natural system, then the likely cause will be a supranatural cause. And if you have highly complex information like in the first living thing, the only likely cause is an intelligent one, so then you posit an intelligent supernatural cause for the universe and living things. That's as far as we go as scientists.
We'll move on to the next question that has to do... Some of us are familiar with this evidence, Dr. Richardson, and perhaps you can address this question. Is there scientific evidence that the footprints of dinosaurs and the footprints of men exist in the same rock layer, and does that have any influence on the topic that we're debating this evening?
The question is there scientific evidence for dinosaur footprints and human footprints occurring at the same time? Of course, the answer is no. There's no scientific evidence at all to that effect. What the question refers to, though, is a site in Texas. It's called Dinosaur Park in the vernacular, and certainly there's lots of evidence there of dinosaur tracks. But the so-called human tracks, some people have claimed to be there, bear very little resemblance to the human foot at all. So, in a very brief way, there's no scientific evidence that dinosaurs and humans were together at one time.
Mr. Geisler, you can respond to that?
I've been to the Paluxy River. I have not seen anything there that would convince a skeptic that there were human footprints along with the dinosaur footprints. But I will say this. There was some kind of bipedal animal that left human-like footprints there that do cross dinosaur footprints, and the evidence for that is just as good as the evidence for Leakey's footprints in Africa. In other words, the distinctiveness of the footprint is just as great in one case as the other. And evolutionists will use Leakey's footprints as an argument that there was a half ape, half man, but they will not allow the other evidence to apply in favor of the simultaneity of dinosaurs and humans. I don't think that's arguing reasonably or fairly. Furthermore, the same evolutionists will say this. Alongside of the so-called human footprints in Africa, there were footprints of, let's say, elephants, footprints of giraffes, and an evolutionist will say the giraffe footprint was a proof that it was a giraffe, 100%. The elephant footprint was a proof that 100% elephant lived there. But the human footprint was a proof that it was half human and half ape.
There are a number of questions here which deal specifically with the problem of can a Christian be an evolutionist, can an atheist, what beliefs are available, what options are available. I'm going to choose one question from that will summarize, I think, most of your questions that I have in front of me now. This is from one of our professors here at LSU in the Religious Studies program that's housed in our Department of Philosophy. There's similar questions to both of our guests today. First of all, Dr. Geisler, what if somehow you became persuaded that evolution was true? Would you then have to stop believing in God? Or could you rethink your concept of God to incorporate this new perspective?
As we indicated on one of our early slides, there are two views with regard to natural law explanations. One, that God created the natural laws and the natural laws explain the origins. The other, that there was no God to create the natural laws, but they explain the origins. One is called theistic and one is called non-theistic evolution. As I indicated in my first presentation, you could be a theistic evolutionist. My own position with regard to theistic evolution is this. It is theoretically possible, scientifically improbable, and biblically untenable. So as a philosopher, I can say, yes, it's theoretically possible. There was a God who created these natural laws and did it. As a scientist, I can say, but when I look at the evidence, I don't see evidence that these natural laws did it. And as a Christian theologian, I can look at the Scripture and say, from the standpoint of the Bible, it says he didn't. So theistic evolution is philosophically possible, scientifically improbable, and biblically untenable.
Dr. Richardson, a corollary question of that is there are a couple of questions up here that ask about, we know Dr. Geisler's religious background. They're asking about your religious background. I think that can be best summarized in the question again. What is your best case for evolution? And beyond that, what if you were to become persuaded that such a theory of evolution did not account for all factors? Where would you turn?
There's two parts to the question, two questions. What's the best evidence for the presence of evolution? You're looking at it right there. You know, there it is, staring you in the face. There's lots of other evidence, but that's the evolution. The evidence for human evolution is right there. Now, what was the second part? I'm sorry.
What if you were to be persuaded that such a theory of evolution didn't account for all the factors?
All right, those are the facts. If you come up with a different interpretation of those facts, well, you know, if I'm going to be a scientist, I have to come up with a different interpretation. Those are the facts. Whatever interpretation best explains those facts, you know, that's the interpretation we'll work with. Now, you've got to keep in mind that interpretation in theory in science is an ongoing matter. You know, it's not something frozen in concrete. We're constantly arguing this, that, and another. And creationists hear us arguing among themselves, and they say, well, you know, creationists don't argue like that. So scientists just argue around. They must not know what they're talking about. But see, that's mistaking discussion and exploration for confusion.
Okay, another question for you. We'll go to you and then ask Dr. Geisler to answer this. Okay. As creationist, Dr. Richardson, has creationist criticism of science or of anthropology resulted in a more careful assessment of evidence and more conservative claims by evolutionary biologists?
No, not at all.
Okay. Let me turn that to you.
One of the reasons for that honest answer is that evolutionists distinguish, as Dr. Richardson did earlier, between evolution as a fact and evolution as a means or process. And they say often, as Carl Sagan did in Cosmos, evolution is not a theory, it's a fact. But the sense in which evolution is a fact is only microevolution that's observable in the present. Macroevolution from the past is not a fact, that's a pure theory. And many evolutionists call it a hypothesis, some even a myth, and some even faith. So when you're talking about macroevolutionary changes in the past that nobody observed and that are not being repeated in the present, we're not talking about facts, we're talking about theories, and those have to be subject to change. And to say that evolution is a fact in the sense of macroevolution is an arrogant claim that some evolutionists make. In fact, I was at the Arkansas trial, creation evolution trial, and one of the evolutionists on the stand said, he was asked, do you believe evolution is a fact? He said, yes. Do you believe that all scientific theories should be tentative, which is how they define scientific theories as one of the characteristics? He said, yes. And the cross-examining attorney said, could you explain to the court what a tentative fact is?
I'm going to combine a couple of your questions here. These are directed, first of all, to Dr. Geisler, specifically to Dr. Geisler. I'll read both of these to you. Your whole argument for creationism is based on disproving evolution. This does not prove creationism. There could be another reason. What facts do you have to prove creationism without disproving evolution? Going along with that, another student wrote, I want to believe in creationism, but there is really no proof. Doesn't the beginning of the earth, according to the Bible, i.e. Adam and Eve, and the time of apes overlap?
With regard to the first question, it is true that some creationists appear to argue, and I think fallaciously, that either evolution is true or creation. Evolution is not true, therefore creation. I think this is not a good argument, and it's not the one that I presented. The one that I presented was that every event must have an adequate cause. The kinds of causes we see in the present to regularly produce events must be the ones posited in the past. So the evidence is positive. There's positive evidence that specified complexity is produced by intelligent beings. You can do it any time you want to blow a fan on your alphabet cereal. You can do it any time you want to drop paper out of the sky. So the evidence is the principle of regularity, which is the basis for positing the same kinds of causes in the past. Whereas evolution has no explanation built in present regular processes that can account for this kind of thing. They finally end up saying, sure, it's highly improbable, sure, it's virtually impossible, but it did happen. That led Sir Fred Hoyle, who was an atheist, in his book Evolution from Space, to say, yes, the chances for evolution of life occurring on Earth by pure chance alone are 1 in 10 to the 40,000th power. Now, 10 to the 40,000th power, more atoms than there are in the whole universe. So that's not like finding a needle in a haystack. That's like finding one atom in the whole universe. To which, of course, an evolutionist responds, but it could have happened. To which we respond that that's building your argument on luck and chance, not on regularly known processes such as I built the argument for creation.
Dr. Richardson, a question directed to you. We've heard an awful lot in recent years about the dating devices, the processes that are used to date artifacts. How accurate are these dating devices, in your opinion?
Well, they're accurate enough to find oil, in the ground. They're the same techniques that are used to date fossils. They're used to date appropriate strata in the earth, so that geologists know to drill down to that strata to get the oil. So that's as accurate as I think as perhaps they need to be. They're bad geologists, that's right.
The dating devices, you said, respond to that?
I might point out that although there are two kinds of creationists, those who hold an old earth and those who hold a young earth. I happen to be an old earth creationist and agree that the universe is probably billions of years old. However, in defense of those who are young earth creationists, I'll point out that there are just as good a geologists who believe and can find oil wells who believe that the universe is only thousands of years old. And in their defense, I'll say one other thing. Dr. Donald Chittick, Ph.D. in chemistry, invented a fossil fuel for 1/3 the price of gasoline. He was sworn in as an expert witness in Arkansas. No one challenged his invention. His invention is built on a young earth model. Rather than coal building up over thousands of years from decaying vegetation, he hypothesized that it built up in short periods by chemical action because he'd see a wooden pillar in a coal mine that within 10 years became coal. Couldn't have been there millions of years. And on that basis, he invented a fossil fuel that will power a car for 1/3 price of gasoline. I think unless the scientific community opens up and is willing to at least look at the evidence for both sides, young and old, evolution and creation, we're going to be hindering scientific...
At the risk of backing up and covering some more ground, this question, first of all, for Dr. Richardson. Do you find that, Dr. Richardson, theistic evolution can be a plausible humanistic view of the beginnings of man?
Well, that sounds a bit like a contradiction to me. Can theistic evolution be a plausible humanistic explanation? I don't think it could be. It couldn't be a plausible humanistic explanation because it's a theistic explanation. So I guess my answer to the question is no, I don't think it's a plausible arrangement.
Let me add to what was said before about theistic evolution, commonly unknown fact that many of the early evolutionists, though some may have personally believed or wondered whether there was a God, did see their theory as directly opposed to God. Charles Darwin, for example, said this: "Belief in God religion, there is no evidence that man was aboriginally endowed with the ennobling belief in the existence of an omnipotent God." Then he went on to say, "I speak of natural selection as an active power or deity." And one of the things that bothers many fair-minded, open-minded people is that you could teach those kind of theories in the public school which are directly intended to exclude God, but you can't teach any theories which are directly intended to include God. In fact, the co-founder of the principle of evolution, natural selection rather, was Alfred Wallace, and he said natural selection is supreme. And he defined it as a process that explained the whole universe. Now, if you can use evolution as a process to explain the whole universe, and evolution to explain what God once explained, then why can't you, alongside of that, at least present the other point of view? Marx, who Charles Darwin wanted to introduce his book and dedicate it to Karl Marx, said this: "Nowadays, in our evolutionary conception of the universe, there is absolutely no room for either a creator or a ruler." And I would just simply appeal to your common sense and to your sense of fairness and ask you this: how can the creationists be called narrow-minded when they're the ones that are arguing for teaching both views in the public schools, and the evolutionists be considered broad-minded when they want to teach only their view?
What Dr. Geisler is really asking is why can't this narrow sectarian view be taught in public schools? Why can't religion be taught in public schools? Well, as we have separation of church and state, we have a constant. we have a constitution which prohibits the teaching of narrow sectarian views in our public schools. I hope we will continue to follow our Constitution.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this evening. There's a lot, many of you have more questions here. Our guests will be available after the end of the program this evening. Please feel free to come forward and meet them. On behalf of the Department of Philosophy and the chapel on the campus, thank you for your presence tonight.